Kia ora, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm sitting here with my friend
Paula Suguturaga,
and we hope you enjoy this episode. Bula, my bro.
Bula vinaka, my brother.
Good to see you. Thank you so much for coming in. It's been something that we've been trying to work in for the last couple of weeks, but I'm glad that we were able to sit you down, especially a special kind of week, I guess, for you in terms of, Fijian Language Week just being passed, but we'll get into that shortly. So before we do get into everything, if you can just let people know what it is you do for a living, I guess your official title, and then we'll get to how you actually got to that point.
Right, nice. I'm a disability services coordinator, and so I work for Aotearoa.
Awesome.
It's a for Pacific Health and Disability provider. So that's what I do. It's a day job.
So that's cool. Yeah. So that gives everyone perspective on what it is that you get to. But before we get into that, I'm going to just say something. So the listeners know that maybe a few years ago I mentioned you especially, and I gave you a special shout out because I don't know if you remember, but at the time I didn't even tell you what was happening. I was battling alcoholism, bad depression and everything, and I reached out to you just knowing that you were drinking kava with the community, and you took me. And I messaged you. I said I need something. Like, is it okay if I come and join you? And that was the start of me on this new, like a spiritual awakening almost, and I really appreciate you for that, and it's been something that was a real huge turning point in my life. So for everyone to be hearing this right now, I'm very grateful to this man, and I'm so privileged to actually have him here sitting with us. So sorry to put that all on you there, but for everyone who's listening, who's been listening for the longest time, that was this man here who was the person who got me that. So thank you so much, man.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it. And I think that's part of who you are as a person. Anyone who talks about you will say that you are one of the most selfless and caring people. And even in the work that you're doing, that sort of work is selfless. A lot of the community work you're doing, and your name comes up anytime they're talking about, Fijian community. So for you, has that always been something that was kind of like part of your upbringing or like your ethos as a person?
Yes. So I grew up in a very religious and traditional family. I grew up with my grandparents because I had 3 other siblings, and it was one after the other, not much of an age gap. And so when I was born in 95, in 96 my younger brother was born, and so like my grandparents said, hey, we're going to take Paula and we'll look after you, well, to my mom, and mom will look after her. And so, I've been, when you grow up as an island kid, you grow up with religion, I've been a Methodist all my life, and my grandparents were founding members of our Methodist church in Maori. It's the hometown, my hometown I grew up in, and so I learned the service from there, the community service, and it's just pretty much, waking up 7 o'clock every morning, doing family devotion with my grandparents. I was 4 or 5 years old, My grandparents wake me up, I'll sit on their lap, and then we'll have family devotion while I fall asleep on their lap. And then you just, you kind of see my grandparents, spreading the mats and preparing, on a Sunday morning for the church members to come in. It just started with the 5-6 families, and now the congregation, which is called the Matana Kilangi, which my late grandfather named, when he stepped down from his position as a church steward. And so I just learned off my grandparents and my family. And pretty much, if you're a Lauan, and if you're hearing this, as a Lauan, service has always been a thing. We are very, we're initiative when it comes to things. We initiate things. So we're doers, pretty much. So... I'm very proud of what I am and how my grandparents raised me, and service has always been my thing.
Right.
And a couple of years ago, when I first came to New Zealand 4 years ago, I was a private contractor as a support worker, and I had to, I was working for this company, and they asked me, you need to put a bio on your profile, and then one of the things that I mentioned is I'm very passionate in serving in our local communities, and that's something that I really want to do. Say if I finish my studies, or if I ever had the opportunity to work for a Pacific healthcare provider, because it's the services are catered to look after our people, whether it's financial capabilities, disability services, whatever. And so, and I'm pretty blessed to be in this position. Shout out to Mr. Nambalangi. Eric. Eric's a community man.
Absolutely.
Or the mayor of Dunedin, as most people refer to him. When I met Eric, it just sort of fueled my, I really want to do this, because I just got off Eric, and Eric just, whatever, regardless how busy his schedule is, it's like, yes, I'll do it for you, So I've always been, and shout out to Eric. Thanks for Eric.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Eric and Lai.
Yeah, for sure. And they're people who, they carry that on so that other people can, become the best of their abilities as well. And something that you said, when you were growing up, being that little kid, and I remember there were parts of me where I was like, why do I have to do I have to get up, I'm tired. But that learning, so when you were going through it, when did you realize that it was a real blessing to be around the traditions and just kind of being a kid and taking it up like a sponge?
It's I guess when you as I grew up as a teenager, I just noticed the congregation, they acknowledge everyone that I talk to, and they ask, the good work that my grandparents have done. And so what's your grandfather's name? Elias. Oh, okay, and you just hear them, this is the man that served this and that. And so it okay, I get it now. It's just a ripple effect. And I realized that at such a young age, I take it off my grandmother. So my grandmother is Tongan, but she was raised in Fiji, and so I acknowledge that part of my my side. I'm half Tongan and half Fijian, and so I'm sure my partner will be really proud of it. Now he's acknowledging the Tongan, but no, I've always had it, as a young age, to realize that service has always been my thing, and looking after my people. But it always, the Bible says everything starts from home, or Jerusalem. So, I started from home with whatever I do now, because you get it right from home, you get it right everywhere else.
Absolutely.
Uni, or if you're part of a community, or if you're part of a club. So,
Then I think that starting from home stuff, that's the beauty of that, is that it's people doing it because it is the right thing to do.
Yes.
Whereas sometimes, people would do stuff so that, other people see them doing it. But at the home, it's from the privacy of you getting your practices correct.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that something that for you, when you're going through it, it's just part of, it's one of those things that feels like the right thing to do, as opposed to, I need to do this so other people see me do it.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm not really that kind of person. Other people's doing it. I do it with, unconditional. Yeah. I do it because I enjoy doing it. And I can't seem to always pronounce it right now, that Psalm 1 saying, the pathway to leadership is service.
Right.
So I've always had that, I knew, all my life I've been doing that, as a kid. Had church stuff and family stuff, and my family, especially I'm my dad's right hand man. So if there's anything else, it's let Paul do this. And so at a young age, as a teenager, I've been entrusted with this responsibility to meet family obligations. And then when you become a young man, you just okay, that's easy. I've done that before.
For sure.
Yeah.
And as part of some of those obligations, are there any that? There are probably plenty, but for you, what were the most kind of grounding things, or the things that you would do regularly, and that's just something that maybe at the time you took for granted, but now as life skills that you now have with you?
There's a lot. There's plenty, a lot. If you follow me on my Instagram stories, so I was born and raised. I was raised on a farm, a family farm, and so most of my stories is just at the farm. That keeps me grounded, and on top of everything else, which is, priorities is my faith in God, which keeps me very grounded. And then everything that follows is I love going to the farm. And being in the islands, life is not as easy as living in New Zealand, because there's a different standard of living. And so you're living to this standard here, and then when you go back to Fiji, you got to go all the way down. And so, I know in life, life's good for me right now. Yeah, it's really good. I also had to battle depression 2 years ago when I was stuck outside of New Zealand because of COVID-19. And it was, I think it was a wake-up call. Yeah, it was a good self-reflection moment. I looked at myself in the mirror. I couldn't recognize myself. Big hair, beard, and lost a lot of weight. I couldn't recognize myself.
Yeah.
And so every time I'm here and I'm eating really good food and all that stuff, I just realized, 2 years ago I wasn't doing this. And so which is why every Saturday I go to the farm, and it just reminds me of my upbringing. It keeps me humble, I guess. Yeah. So, and on top of the service, it's hard to be like to sit up there and receive all the service.
Yeah.
It's a different story when you're providing that service. It gives you that satisfaction that so especially in the line of work that I do, providing that service to people, and then when you go to a church, church stuff, you're serving all these church ministers and our community elders, and so so for me it's always been the service.
And just something that that's part of a value. That's a value for you. And then moving to New Zealand, where things get easier, where you can just order things of convenience, because like you were talking about in your stories, you're getting the animals, you're skinning them, you're doing everything to do that. But if you didn't want to, you could just go to the supermarket, go to the butcher, get it all done. So how did you, what was it about actually going and doing those processes for yourself that kind of kept you doing it?
I think one of it is just like active relaxing.
I
like, some people on the day off, they just want to sit back, watch Netflix and relax. For me, my form of relaxing is more I'm not a workaholic, little bit, but I don't know, it's just my upbringing, I guess. It's just my... There's only one day that I rest, and it's on a Sunday.
On your Sundays,
and that's how my grandparents raised me. From Monday to Friday is work. Saturday slows down a bit because you're preparing for Sabbath.
Absolutely.
And then on Sunday, it's just sit back and chill. So, I've always been that.
Awesome. And now we're going to get into the land work, because I've tried to talk to people about this, and people who've never visited the island or ever been on a farm, because farmers from New Zealand get it. They know the labour-intensive work that you have to go through. But for your, at what age did it start that you were, running land, and what type of things were you cultivating in that land as well? So give the stories.
Yes. So it, like I said, it started very young. At 4 years old, 5.
Wow.
It was not farming for me. It was just pretty much helping my granddad pick up his fork, his digging fork. And so I would just pick that up for him, and then I'd follow him, and then he just plants and digs away, and I'll sit and watch him. And so as time goes by, at 6, 7, 8, I started to understand things, because as a 5-year-old, you'll be playing toys, you won't be understanding much. But I spent most of my childhood days with my grandfather, just following him around and seeing what he does, and people find this strange that I don't drink coffee. And they ask me, why don't you drink coffee? Because I have never had coffee as a child.
Wow.
My grandparents never drank coffee, because I just drank the lemon leaf tea, lemongrass and tea. And so I've never had coffee until I grew up, as a teenager, high school. And then I still didn't like coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker.
Right.
And so, not saying that we were too poor to afford coffee, but I just never had it.
Just wasn't a norm.
It was just not a norm, and those little things. I had chocolate once a month, because my grandfather had his pension every month. And so that was the only time I had chocolate. And so my partner says, he's got a perfect set of teeth, because my grandfather was more of a savory than sweet. So, because sugar decays your teeth quicker than salt. So which is why,
And then so when you were watching those things, and you were taking an interest in it, did you just over the years just start doing more and more?
I just started more and more, and so I got up to a point where I could actually dig a fork. I was strong enough. Okay, granddad said you're probably strong enough to dig a fork. Okay, this is your first try digging a hole. You just started as digging a hole, and then just trying turning over the soil with because it's hard stuff. If you're trying to dig a new plot, with land that has never been plowed, with a digging fork. Now you could imagine, imagine like I'm 27 now. Like about say 15 years ago, I mean, we were not rich enough to afford a tractor. So we did everything manual. pretty much you go to Fiji and farmers, even commercial farmers,
Yeah.
very traditional. They just don't have the money to
For sure.
to afford tractors like how in New Zealand,
Yeah.
those machinery, agricultural machinery to help, make work faster, working smart. Everything was just done manually. And so I've had that interest as a young age. To a point my aunties and my uncles would discourage me, stop following your grandfather around. That's not going to pay for the bills. You need to go to school, stay in school and do that. And it's like, yeah, okay, sure. But I had that passion for a long time, and ever since, and anywhere I'd go, I'd try to look for land, see if I can, either plant or need to do something with it. And and I've been very blessed to have met. They've adopted me into their family, not legally, but they say, "Oh, you're you're the honorary member of our family." So the Americans, which is the farm that I raise animals on.
Very cool.
And so we've always raised animals and crops in Fiji, but not to a level where they do it. It's commercial, and there's so much information, so much skill that I learn from them. Like, oh, this is how you're supposed to raise this, and Fiji is like, oh, we do it differently, which is why sometimes I sit back, I look at my stock, and I look at the stock that we have in Fiji. Man, these pigs look different because we were not doing that right. But when you do it the proper way, it's an investment, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And that's some of the things, like that was the philosophies behind people coming to Aotearoa was to take skills and to learn those different skills and then to be able to apply it when they went back home. When you were in the environment as well, so this was before we had consoles and on phones and all that, so you were just like out in the environment a lot. Like, do you find that that's part of that grounding process?
Yeah, all the time. Back when we were kids, technology was not really as advanced as of today. It was more of like family time, more community time. But majority of my livelihood or my childhood days was just spending time with my family, and also there's three things that just kept me grounded. It was just church, my family, and the farm. And those are the three pillars that have sort of made me what I am today.
For sure.
And then as soon as I turned 21, my parents' gift was to send me away, and then I came to New Zealand, and so it was we call it in Fiji a culture shock, because I've been to Papua New Guinea and Vanuatu, but not as a country such as New Zealand, like well-developed countries, and first 2 to 3 years in uni was a challenge because I was trying to adjust to how things are here and things were. And Otago University, the great student life. But no, those pretty much those things.
And it's a really good place to bring it now. You go from pretty much something that's very like everything's so communal when you're back home, and everything you're doing is either to work on this land so that other things can come and we can continue to provide, and then you come here where a lot of the things are just very individualistic. People are doing what they want so that they can go forward. The community is a different sense of community. It's more people coming to things so that they can get something out of it, and that's part of the culture shock. But what people don't realize is when you're talking about culture shock, you're also trying to get a tertiary education, which is difficult on its own, as well as moving country. So, what were the main things going through your head as part of that transition?
There's a whole lot of things. I was pretty grateful. How you mentioned the communal part in here. It was individual. I guess when I first arrived into Dunedin, I didn't have a support structure, and the only person that I knew was Eric and Lai and the family. And so I just like sitting back, I don't even know how I did it. I don't know. It's just hard to quantify, hard to put things into process until I had to experience how things were, the life in New Zealand, and then from then was just a learning experience from, I did this wrong this time, I had to do it right, and just changing my ways up a bit. And then I guess for me, maturity came with age, and so like sometimes it's the other way around. So people say I'm beyond my years in terms of maturity, but part of it was I had really good friends too, George and Atron. really good friends that have. I've always told them like Dunedin is a temporary place for most of us.
Sure.
People come here and train and then they leave. But for me, I thought of that the same way. But until I decided, oh, now I'm gonna make Dunedin my home.
Yeah.
And one of the condition was for me to leave Dunedin is I have to leave Dunedin with my degree in my hands.
Good man.
And so, like, how was I going to do that? Was to pretty much change my behavior and my attitude towards studies and uni, and I guess it all came together when I went to Fiji. I think it was meant to be, or it was meant to be because it was a self-reflection moment.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard when you're outside of the country.
Absolutely.
And you're thinking about, okay, all the silly stuff that you've been doing for the last 3 years in uni, and the regret just kills you.
Yeah.
And it adds to the depression, and you're like, oh my gosh, you know, the borders are closed now. What am I going to do? What happens if I can't return? You know, it's just hard. But you know, I'm like, I think about it now. I think whatever that I've been doing in the past, I don't think I'd ever do it again.
Yeah. And that's most people who, you know, get to that point of not necessarily a rock bottom, but a point where they're allowed to have that self-reflection and that, you know, I don't ever want to feel like this again.
Yeah.
Some people, you know, once they get out of it, which can be a long time for a lot of people, some people are still going through that, but for those who see it and can start putting steps in place, like it's a really good launching pad for you. So after that, like, were there promises that you were making to yourself or plans that you were putting in place for yourself?
Yes, absolutely. I've always had plans for myself. You know, with one aim. My only goal was to get into medicine and become a doctor. And so I had to put things into perspective. Like, I had to cut things out. I had to, especially with my attitude with studies, because I was studying previously in Fiji, and then I decided, my parents just pulled me out of uni, like, oh, go to Otago University, you know, and obviously paid a lot of money for me to be here. And I had a plan. Okay, in 3 years' time, I need to achieve this, and what do I need to do to achieve this? And so I've been receiving great advice from people that have been successful with studies, like yourself. I you know, the podcast that you do, the work that you do for Pursue, and other people that I look up to, it helps me formulate my own plan. Okay, he's done this and that, and also listening to their journey, their story of coming, and like, oh, okay, that's very motivational, because you can't. Sometimes it's hard to do things if you're not motivated.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so if it's easier if you like to do it, if you want to do it, but if you don't, it's just hard.
It's a long slog.
Like you say, like a launch pad. And so my plan for the next 3 to maybe 3 years is to finish my undergrad, and hopefully if I can get into medicine, there'll be like a dream come true. But that has always been my goal. Has always been my ultimate goal. And it's funny enough, I used to, as a 5-year-old, my dad is like, oh, you're going to be a doctor, because I'm named after my uncle, who's also a doctor. And so that expectation is like, oh, your uncle's a doctor, you need to be a doctor too. It's like, I'll be a doctor on my own terms. I'm not being a doctor because my uncle's me. I'm following now. I just, because I wanted to, and you know, it's already like the service. You know, I love serving people, and so, which has always been the drive to what I wanted to achieve. If it's, you know, being a doctor, if it's starting a business or whatever it is. But so yeah, that's pretty much me for.
That's awesome. Yeah, because you've studied at multiple places, and then what was it that, like, you know, for yourself, looking at before versus now, and that drive to be able to do it, like, for yourself, are there like specific things that you've just kind of given yourself so that you can stay motivated to do it? Yes,
I was just like, you know, my mom used to, you know, there's no one else that knows us better than our parents.
Of course, yeah.
My mom would say, I see something with you. You can't focus on one thing at a time. And so, like, you need to cut out all the things that you've been doing, and then so you can focus on finishing this degree and finishing that. And so, you know, with my history of studying, like, I finished that, and then as soon as I decided to come to Otago Uni, you know, it's like, stop. There's been a lot of roadblocks.
Yeah.
And so I guess I just take it alone. It was a hard lesson to learn, you know, to start with, and I guess just improving my processes and trusting myself that I can get things done. And I guess it's the discipline too.
Yeah.
If your mind's not disciplined enough to finish something, and the dedication, you
Yeah.
won't finish it at all. So
Yeah.
it's just getting all those from the studies that I've, because it's great studying at Fiji and having those qualifications, but when you're given the opportunity to come and study at Otago University, this is the same university that trains our doctors
Yeah.
to be lecturers and specialists.
Yeah.
And so when I was given that opportunity, this is my shot. But yeah, just improving on my processes.
Yeah.
And yeah.
That's very cool. That's very, very cool. And I know because as part of your work, there were stepping stones to actually get you to where you are now. And it's awesome to see it because I know you had a couple of years, right, doing the work that you were doing before this. So do you just want to, how did you actually get into that line of work before getting to your position now?
Right. So when I came to New Zealand, I was sent to do a diploma in healthcare, level 5. It was a private institution in Auckland. It was pretty much a caregiver's degree or something, and that was the starting of how I got involved in support working as an independent contractor in the disability services sector, pretty much intellectual and physical. And so I did that, and I finished that diploma, and then I just decided I didn't feel enough.
Okay.
So I asked my Dad, I know this is going to be a massive investment, but I want to go to uni instead of a private institution. Like, oh, son, I don't think I can afford that. And then, God's been kind to us and our family. And then all of a sudden, Dad got promoted and said, oh, hey, son, I actually think I can afford going.
Wow.
And so when I had the opportunity to come here to Otago University, I had already that experience from Auckland.
Sure.
And so it's just, I came as a blunt knife and I got sharpened up here at the Great Dunedin because there's a lot of clients to deal with here.
Yeah.
So this company would send me clients because I'm a proper contractor, and then I will go out and look after, the people in the community. It was not Pacifica, it was for everyone, but you needed to be registered under their website. And so that was a training ground for me.
Yep.
To be I had no problem with the training part because I've always used to the service.
Yeah, of course.
It's a paid service, but I'm used to the service. And sometimes people tell me like, oh, you're pretty good with looking after, because I've always done it as a kid. I've looked at
of course,
providing service with the church service, and something as simple as spreading the mats and getting the cups together, cleaning the whole compound outside, making sure that the home's nice and presentable. That's a form of service. And if people don't take that into account when you're sort of when they're working for these major companies, because those are the starting ground of everything.
For sure.
And so that's how I pretty much got into the disability sector. I worked with people with physical disabilities for a long time, about 4 or 5 years. And then when I joined Community Care Trust, which I will mention them because that was the place that trained me to deal with people with intellectual disabilities.
Right.
And so I did that for about 2 years. And then shout out to Lai, because Lai's asked me like, hey, there's an opening at Vakatautua, and it's a provider that's they're expressing their interest in opening up a branch here. So see if you like, okay, I'll just apply for it. Because I was actually looking for not really a way out from Community Care Trust, but was more of I always knew inside of me that I wanted to do something for the community.
Yeah.
In order to do that, I needed to work for a provider that would cater for the needs of our Pacific people, our Pacific communities. And so when that opportunity came up, I just grabbed it with all, both hands, and, hoping that I'd get into the position. And so ever since I've been in the role, I've just been blessed. I've been connecting with a lot of people, and you just see the need that our people need.
Yeah.
Like very, very specific, and it's hard to, because some people can be as specific. You'll be shy to seek assistance, especially if you're coming from Palangi perspective.
Absolutely.
It's just hard to support them, and language is a barrier too.
Yeah.
Not everyone speaks English, and so. It has been my challenges for the work that I've been doing, but I love it.
That's fantastic. Yeah, because I remember we met maybe a couple of months ago. There was the student presentations to the community stakeholders, and you were one of them. And you came up, and I remember you were talking about what you're doing. I was like, that's like the perfect progression from where you had been, because you'd had those years of experience actually working on the ground, operational, and now you get to step into more the policy side, but also keeping that like you're doing both now. And there's something that you touched on that I try to talk about often on here, is that there are different needs for our Pacific people, but also Maori people, so the indigenous groups, and it's the when you are giving that extra service, you're coming all the way back. It's not just the service that clients are getting and paying for, but it's also the environment that you're creating for them. So as part of your role, what are some things, or like the main differences that you've seen between working with Pākehā and then working with Pacific peoples and the different needs?
It's just the culture.
Yeah,
it's always been the culture to begin with. You want to be culturally appropriate, and two is the language. Always been the language, because how else are you going to get the information through without proper communication channels? You've got to approach our people with a specific way. You can't really approach them with. That's something that I had to struggle with when I started with Wakatautua, because I'm so used to working in open, like a mainstream provider.
Right.
And there was no barriers, and then all of a sudden you started working for Pacific provider. I was like, oh, no, you can't do this, you can't say this, you can't say that, because, not everyone has a good sense of humor. You want to say something and then offense, and then they don't want you to come back.
Yeah, right.
But no, I like every challenges that come through. I see it as a learning experience.
Absolutely.
I take it. You can't always be perfect all the time. Sometimes you've got to, take the bads too, and you learn from it. And I am pretty lucky to be in this role, because I'm not only providing the service that's under me, I'm also learning the culture too. From the different Pacific ethnic communities that are here in Dunedin. And I mean, Dunedin is not really a big place, but we've got our people here.
Yeah, for sure.
We've got our people here. So so something like that.
That is awesome. Yeah, that is very, very awesome. And then something else that people don't really consider is that, when we look at ourselves and we're like, man, we're getting old. But for the type of work that you're doing, you're still very, very young. And then you're in your infancy in terms of like the job and the stuff that you're providing, but also the people surrounding you in these roles are people who've been around, for a while. They know the code. But then for you coming in, how do you manage that? There's kind of a new energy that you're bringing as a young person, but then also the respect that we have and the reverence we have for those for the people who have been around for a while. So is that like something that's difficult for you to go through, or is it something that you're aware of and you know how to kind of go through?
That's definitely something I'm aware of, because not everyone thinks the same. You've got like the traditions, the traditional thinking, and then you've got the modern. It's kind of. If you're pretty good at it, you can easily integrate a bit of modern and tradition. It's just how you put it to them. The context too. Context is always important in everything you do, without trying to offend anyone too much, because the line of work that we do in any kind of work, some people might be very territorial.
For sure.
And so you don't want to be stepping on other people's toes. So you just gotta be this. It's my favorite word. You just got to be diplomatic with your approach, because if you're not, you're creating more enemies than friends.
Yes, yeah.
You pretty much you've got that sense of respect that these people have been, our leaders or whoever that I deal with, they've been doing this for a long time, and so it's incredible. It can be a challenge to introduce new ways to them, because they've never used this, I'm used to this process, and it's worked for me for the last 15 to 20 years. Okay, that's fine. Have you tried this? Instead, it might be like the smarter way of doing it, but like I said, you got to approach it in a way, or present it in a way that they can actually understand what you're trying to say.
Sure.
Those I've had those experiences, but like I said, if you're a approachable person, and also some people are just hard as a rock. You can't move them. You just got to give it time for them. And sometimes you just got to have that initiative. Okay, let me try this and see if it works. And then they'll realize, okay, that actually works. So you gotta prove to them whatever.
Sure.
That you come with your ideas that actually work. So, but I guess you just gotta back yourself too sometimes. Because that's how they say rugby. You take the ball back yourself.
Exactly. Well, that's a good point, because I do know that a lot of those times, you have to be so secure in the processes that you're doing, and by you actually, showing them, hey, it works, and then people, talking about it, it works, and then word gets around. But that's only if you continue to back yourself on your processes, and then you also are someone who's willing to take criticism, or not criticism, but feedback.
Yeah. I mean, if you're like, for me, I've always I'm used to taking criticism, positive criticism, or whatever you call it. Because in a way, I grew up in that. I'm sure my auntie, I'll show this my auntie, because she's always been my biggest critic.
Sure.
In terms of life decisions. And my mom, especially my mom, but my auntie is a why person. Whatever you do, she'll ask, why did you do this? Right. Why did you do that? So you're sort of having to explain. And also, as an island boy, you get telling off all the time. So when you get told off for most of the silly things that you do, and you go out there as an adult and you work for this major corporation and these companies, and so someone is telling you off like, oh, I'm comfortable because they're trying to tell me something. And you're like, oh, okay, I've done this wrong. Okay, I've done that. So you just gotta have an open mind. And don't take things too personal.
Absolutely.
But that's pretty much how I handle criticism or feedback, because in a way you're actually improving your service.
Absolutely.
Improving the way you do things. Because you might not see it. What you do, regardless that it has been working for the last years or so, but you can't see the faults, but other people can. So if you're not able to sort of take feedback of the faults that people are seeing, how do you expect to grow? And
it is that sort of stuff. It is the feedback that people give you, and if you get so comfortable in your ways, there could be so much new information coming in, and you could be going so far off the path of what was correct just because you haven't had that check. And another thing is part of that, which when you were talking, I just that's because we do everything that we're doing is not because we think it's the right thing to do. It's because it's the thing that's right for the people we're serving. So is that something that you'll always check in with as well? When people come to us or for assistance, we pretty much work with what their needs are. And so, okay, what you think is right for you, that's fine. But we can't really say like for me, I can't really say to people, because part of my job is I'm an advisory service. We just offer them advice on how to do things, and then it's up to them. They'll take it in and they think about it like, okay, we'll try this and see if it works for us. But always, any kind of form of support, and we just cater to what their needs are. Especially if it works for them. It's fantastic. And I think part of that is kind of alluding to through this entire conversation has just been, it's part of your upbringing is to make sure that when you are serving, you're serving for the right reasons and serving the people that you intended to serve when you're making your decisions. And that brings us to a really cool thing, and that's, you are talking about culture, you're talking about all of that, and how part of for you coming forward, and this is something I really commend you on, because this was before everyone was, everyone's a bit more open now about men talking about their struggles, their mental health, and you were one of and this is why I knew you were the right person to contact when I was having, when I was like, I don't know what to do anymore. Because you were very open about it, and you shared the photo that you were talking about. You said you couldn't recognize yourself. There was literally you in one state and then you in another state, and it was so different. Like you said, your hair was grown out, beard. You were so gaunt, like there was nothing in your face, and you went through that and you shared your journey through it, and you got a huge response. Like a lot of people, I think, really resonated with it, but we'd never seen one of our own brothers be so open about it. what was the drive for you to be able to share it, but also, kind of reflect properly and not beat yourself up for letting yourself get to that point?
So around the same time it happened, I had lost a family member through depression because they just couldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
And so I decided, like, okay, there's, depression, mental health was never a thing in the islands. It still is now.
Yeah.
When someone is going through a tough time, it's like, oh, you're just stressed.
Yep.
There's never been any proper education around, if you've got something, let it out, to sort of have that confidence. And so I've got a lot of cousins and a lot of people that think that they feel that I'm very influential.
Sure.
And so I've decided, okay, if I do this and sort of like, because I'm a very open person.
Yeah.
You could read me like a book.
Right.
And so I decided, like, okay, it was just getting too much. And also now that I was back in New Zealand, it's just the feeling of being grateful. And then I was in a better spot now. I felt like, okay, I think it's about time that I sort of talk about what I had to go through, what I went through for the last 2 to 3 years, or when I was in that state specifically, because someone out there in this university in Fiji is going through the same thing.
Absolutely.
And so it helps when you talk about it, so they can sort of be relatable to what they go through, because not all of them alone. And to be honest, I was really in a bad state like 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
And once I was mentally healed, spiritually healed,
Yeah.
it gave me that confidence, like, okay, our church ministers all they preach about, say, if you got a problem, you got to share it.
Yeah.
But you need to find the right person to share it with.
Right.
And also, words is a powerful thing. Social media right now is a good platform to do good and bad things.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
And so I've always been active on the social media platform with things that I do, whether if it's service to the community or family stuff. And I thought, okay, maybe I will use this platform to talk about what I've been through in the past, or what the struggles that I've had. Maybe it'll help someone. Yeah. So that it's okay to talk about it.
Yeah.
If you're going through a lot, talk to someone.
Yeah.
Don't bottle your emotions, because as soon as you keep the bottle. When you bottle up emotions, there's limitations to it. One day it'll burst.
Yeah.
And when it'll burst, the last thing I want to see is a brother hanging from a tree, or someone's just taking their own life.
Yeah.
Because things are just too much for them. And I've always had this habit of calling up my good mates, like, hey, check on your bros, like, kind of thing, see if they're well. And some of them are like, oh man, I'm stressed right now. Okay, let's talk about it. And so I do that sometimes. And if I'm not too busy, I do that.
No, that's awesome. Because like I said, that's how I knew you were the person. And I didn't want to say, hey, I've got all these problems, but it was just like I needed to open that door. And then you took me into a space, and that's where we can get into now. But you took me into a space where everyone's just so open. So you took me to a group of Fijian men getting together and they're going through the practice of kava. And now you're the person who introduced me to that world. So for you, has this. I mean, actually, what we'll do is we'll explain what kava is and then what the kind of ritualistic stuff around it is.
Right. So kava is, I get asked this question a lot, especially for non-kava drinkers. So kava is a plant, and it's the root of a plant, and the scientific name is called Piper methysticum. And it takes about 4 years to harvest. Seasonal kava drinkers, if you harvest it too early, they can tell. It's not ready. It's just like wine, pretty much. The longer you leave it, the stronger it becomes. So you can actually taste the difference between a kava that's been harvested for 4 years and then 7 years. 7 years is too strong. So so kava is we only, like in the olden days, probably when my ancestors are still around, but it's only consumed during special occasions, especially if there's a chief visiting, if there's any form of events.
Yeah.
That's the only time we drink kava. But because as time goes,
Sure.
the culture becomes more flexible, more
Absolutely.
diluted. And so as a Fijian, and I speak for myself and for my family, that we consume kava for social kind of stuff. We drink
Sure.
it socially because it's I guess my upbringing is there's no meeting without kava. There's nothing.
Right.
We use it as a form of socializing and conversation,
Yep.
and it's just like I always say this: we don't drink it for the taste, we drink it for the feeling that it gives you. Just like your pretty much wine or alcohol that you drink. So yeah, kava is consumed on very special occasions, but in this day and age, we drink it socially. So
Yeah, and as part of that, you taught me so much when we were going through it, about the way that the bowl faces, and then like we're sitting, like all of that, and then opening the circle, and then who calls when, clapping. So all of that stuff, is that just stuff that you picked up growing up, or is it something that is bestowed upon people? Like, how does that go?
So that's part of the culture.
Yeah.
So when you drink kava in a formal setting, with very important men like chiefs, or it's just your village elders, community elders. That's how you do it. And so when you look at a kava bowl, or in Fijian we call it a tanoa, in Tongan they call it a kumete. So it has a head and a tail. So a head will have the triangle on the top, on the front side of it, and the tail has nothing. And so you'll face that to whoever is sitting from the top. So if it's the chief elder, community leader, if you're a chief guest, he'll always face you. And so as a leader, you'll always have a spokesman. So that spokesman will call the taki. It's like, okay, next time when you drink, like when it's time to drink, he's the person that calls it. Whether if you need to drink every 3 to 4 minutes, it's his call, or if you drink every 6-7 minutes, it's his call. And so that was what happens is the chief guest drinks first, and then his spokesman will drink second. And it's the same for only the group of men that sits on top of, like beyond the tano. Anyone that's behind them is just normal. So it goes in pairs. So if there's about 6 people there, the leader will drink first, and then the spokesperson. Then there's another leader will drink first, and then there's a spokesperson. So something like that. So we call it, because it's Fijian Language Week, it's the rambe. So next time you come to a kava session with us, you will drink first, and then the guy sitting, you rambe, so I'll drink second after you. So it's that's how it goes.
No, it's awesome, and it's cool how you've kept those traditions. And I think the day that I came, I remember just how special it was, because you were also welcoming new people to the Fijian community, people who had just moved in, and that's the spot where people can come in and feel that sense of belonging. And I remember one of the elders came in, and we were playing music, and he turned the music off, and he said, "Time for talanoa." And that was just a time where everyone would introduce themselves and start to feel that belonging. Is that also something that is kind of the benefits of having it?
That's one of the reasons why I enjoy kava sessions with the men. It's the singing, it's the feeling of inclusiveness. You Fijian or non-Fijian, that's the time for you to come in and what do you call it? A kind of form of fellowship.
Absolutely.
It's I like, throughout my years as a teenager and as of today, I hated kava. I don't know, like I looked at Dad. It's like, Dad, why do you like drinking kava? It's like, because it's the fellowship. I feel welcomed, and you get to tell stories, you get to sing songs. It's the same sort of what do you call it? The whole night. The same vibe the whole night. You come, you drink if you had your limit, and then you go off home. You go home with a happy feeling, just satisfied that sometimes you can be like men in my club. They're blue collars. They some of them are carpenters, some of them are line mechanics, and the work that they do is very physically demanding, physically draining. And so when they come in, they sit down, it's their form of relaxation as they sit and sing songs and just forget about the troubles that they face. And so some of them, kava is members, men that sit there is probably not really the place for them to talk about their problems.
Sure.
But because of the fellowship, it's just, they tend to just forget about things and they just sit and relax. It's their time to enjoy. So which is why it's always been a social thing when we drink kava. And I don't encourage drinking kava 4 times because you get there's so much you can get out of kava: dry skin and dry lips and dehydration. But I enjoy it because of the fellowship. Speaking of this, they'll probably be drinking kava right now. I said, "Oh no, I've got to shoot off and I'll be back." shortly.
Nice. And then part of that also, I've met them a few times, and then ever since then, they've always checked in. How am I going? Every time I see them, obviously, because they had come over, watch us at AU, and it'd be the same every time, and they just like remember you, and they want to check in, and they properly care. And when I was sitting there as well, I was picking up on the informal stuff. Who teases who? All that sort of stuff.
Right.
So like, what's the ruling around that?
Okay, so in Fiji, we've got 14 provinces. I don't know about like Cook Island, like if you've got like a neighboring village.
Sure, the villages,
You've got like that, what do you call it?
Like a rivalry?
Rivalry, yeah. So like in Fiji, there's 14 provinces. Okay, so you'll have like men joking to each other because their provinces are rivals. So that's how it works. So you can't joke to a man from another province that you're rival with. It has to be the same person, the other province that you're on, because if you do that, you don't actually don't. So men are aware, like like when to joke and when not to joke and so all that stuff. But as Fijians, we pretty much laugh at anything serious. Laugh at it. It's just we're just happy people. And it's that relationship. It's that relationship. You've got to you need to know where he comes from. In order for you to sort of joke around with them. Sure. So when we introduce ourselves for the first time, we always say, okay, my name is this, and I'm from this place, and he's my rival. And so we don't take it like full on. It's just like joking around kind of thing, just to that level. Right. But when it comes to like serious matters, we like, of course, everyone's on.
Yeah. And that's such a beautiful thing. And I think, maybe in Te Ao Pākehā, or what we'll call like the English world or the European world, where it's I am this is my job, and like your title is more important than who you are and where you're from. And because in Maori as well, it's ko wai koe ko, like we're figuring out who you are, but also what lineage you're from, and that comes back all the way to a place, and that place will then dictate how you operate in that world. And that's the same for, I think, for most Pacific
culture. Like, if we know that you're a chief, we don't joke with you. Or if you're a church minister, we don't joke with you. And so it's just, I think that hierarchical system, which is pretty common, brought to us by the British colonial way of. So, like, we know our limits. We know who to joke with and who to not. But you won't know until you ask them where they're from.
For sure.
And some people, like, say, for example, like in my culture, when your name starts with Ratu, R-A-T-U, you're a chief from somewhere. Okay. And so you want to sort of like tread carefully. Some chiefs now, like, they're born in the modern era. They're very like, we don't care. You can joke with us. It doesn't matter. But in my culture, like, you have to be born a chief. Right. You can't be appointed as a chief. Okay. So that's the difference between us and any other Pacific cultures, ethnic cultures in the Pacific. You need to be born a chief. You can't just be, like, your role. Like, for me, my traditional role is I'm a warrior. So I got our clan leader, our clan chief, and also the chief of our entire island. And then you've got the fisherman, and you've got the spokesperson, the Rambe person. Or he's Matani Vanua. That's the formal title. Right. Matani Vanua, and then you've got everyone else that falls under the hierarchical system. And so when you, especially from my province, the Lau province, LEU, if you don't know where you stand, oh man, you'll get dragged around. Right. So you got to know where you stand and when to speak and when not to speak. Yeah, so yeah,
that's I mean that's something that we always talk about as well, as knowing who you are. And it's not just knowing who I am, like this is my name, but it's knowing who you are, where you stand, and all of that, so that you hold fast to all that, because that's part of your grounding. That's part of who you are and what you're meant to do as well. And a lot of that actually gives you direction, which they've found recently, like people who don't have that sense of belonging, like you said, actually it was a really good way of saying it. You know, you do get dragged around, and that's where a lot of the, you know, issues that we would have start to come from, is because the people don't have that sense of belonging. And just one thing I wanted to talk about with kava wise before we go into the next thing, before we start wrapping up, is, you know, you brought a Cook Islander into a Fijian scene. And, you know, at the time, everyone was very hospitable and just so happy to have me there. And I was this privilege to be able to talk with everyone. And now, you know, we live in multicultural society, and I'll be, you know, going to different circles. There'll be, say, Tongan doing theirs, Samoan, Fijian, all in one. Is that for you now, like that hybrid of tradition, and sometimes it's just a way more relaxed now, but is that becoming more and more common?
Yeah, so the thing about Fiji, like Fiji is a multi-ethnic.
Sure, yeah.
So you go to Fiji and you see all kinds of people there. Like, you know, you're like, oh, are you Fijian? Yes, I'm Fijian. So for us, it's not really an issue. Like, we were sort of used to it, you know. Mixing with other Pacific Island countries, we love it. We enjoy when there's a Samoan or a Tongan or someone that mix around with. We love it. And I'll tell you a story. One time, the Moatan is Maunga.
Oh yeah.
So we had the celebration, Fiji Day celebration, 2 years ago or a year ago, and so we had we invited the members of the Tongan community to join us.
Awesome.
It was pretty much open. Whoever wanted to join us came, and so the Tongans responded and they came. And so everyone was just mixing around, and it was almost a competition, bro. Singing.
Oh, nice.
I mean, apart from kava, drinking, who drinks the biggest bowl, it was a competition. It was like, it was beautiful to see. Like, and it was like for us as Methodists, like we'll sing like country songs and all worldly songs from on a Saturday, because it was on a Saturday night, right up until it hits 12. As soon as it hits 12, it's a church song. Sabbath. And so as soon as it hits 12, you just hear the Tongans started singing their church songs. And then I turned to the men. Next, right after they finished singing, it's out there. It was just a back and forth. But it was so beautiful, man. Like everyone was just like because you know what kava does to you.
Of course.
As soon as they started singing the gospel songs, and I'm like, oh man, this is so uplifting, you know. And so it was like they complimented us with their church songs. We did the same thing to them too. And so when they sang their songs, we joined them too. And it was a back and forth kind of thing. And so I loved it. I loved that kind of atmosphere and that environment. Sort of, you know, everyone's working together, and I just love it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And it kind of just comes down to the terms of negotiate. Like when you get there, you'll just talk about how things are going to go. And it's the communication. Once you get that right, then everything after that is about bonding fellowship. Oh, that's fantastic. That would have been awesome to be part of.
Oh man, I just wished you were there, bro. And it's nice, and you have kava, those kava nights. And then when you go out into, when you work and you meet them randomly, it's like, hey, you're someone to know. And so, it can even like be, you might need assistance, and the same guy that you drink kava with is standing up to help you. Because everyone works everywhere, pretty much PIs in Dunedin, they work in all different sectors.
We have to,
and so when you see someone come in, oh, yep, I know them. So just having that connection,
And then as someone who grew up in your language, knowing your language, and have that connection, and then being able to speak your own language with those people regularly as well, just to make sure you're feeling that piece of home and bringing that, the importance for you. We have 1 week here to celebrate, Fijian Language Week, which is awesome. But for you, what does that hold for you?
Pretty special. I mean, language is our identity, and it's funny enough that you said that we've had families that have just that have moved here, a couple of years ago, and then you just realize that their kids are slowly losing the language. And then I'd sit back and I'd tell them off, like, because I'm always in charge of the youths and kids. I'm like, look, you guys, your kids were born in Fiji. You shouldn't be losing your language. And so, like I said, it always starts from home. When you're speaking it from home, the kids will speak it.
Yep.
And you won't have that issue of like, oh, we can't speak the lingo because, our parents didn't speak it to us. But every time I, speak in my native language, it just connects me to home.
Yep.
And I just feel like, I feel connected. I feel that, my identity is there. And making sure that that whoever I speak it to, like because I've had, like in the past, I've had like Fijians that were born and raised here.
Sure.
And then they ask me like, oh, what's the meaning of this word? I'm like, oh yeah, okay. If you want, I'll teach you how to speak in Fijian. And then sometimes they message me oddly. And it's like, oh, okay, can you tell me what this meaning is? You just, you feel like, I don't know, it's just that satisfaction that you're helping someone out.
Sure.
Because and also it's pretty cool when you say, oh, you're speaking bilingual. So like, I speak two, three languages, and so I try to, regardless, my partner's tongue, and we'll have some moments like, oh, can you teach me some Fijians? Not the swear ones, because everyone starts with the swear words like that.
Yep.
But vice versa. So I just keeps me connected, keeps me rooted to my language.
For sure. And I think the beauty of it, when you start learning the language, or when you remember the language, and you start, some of the native speakers, you can tell because the way that they speak are talking about stories of places.
Yeah.
And it might be a word that if you were to translate it, makes no sense.
It doesn't. That's the thing too. The thing about our language, if it's Cook Islander or Fijian, there's some words that can never be translated into English, which is special.
Yeah.
That is very special.
Yeah.
So, which is why I'm always, we are lucky that we have our native languages because it tells us apart from everyone else.
For sure.
And, it's said in this day and age that, some people are losing that, every year. I don't know what the stats are, but there's languages dying.
Yep.
Every single. And in Fiji, there's 14 provinces. One formal, everyone speaks the common Fijian language.
Yep.
But there's heaps of like,
dialects.
Yeah, say Eric's dialect
Yep.
is different from mine.
Yeah.
If Eric speaks his dialect, I couldn't understand what he's saying.
Wow. Yeah. Right.
So the uniqueness of our language, and of course it ties in with language week. So which is why there's 14 provinces, and so the province one might not speak the same lingo as province two. So, so.
No, that's beautiful. I always find talking about language just beautiful in general, and being able to pick them up, and just something that I ask everyone that wraps up the conversation. But I'm sure we're going to get you on at some other point. There were so many things we just touched on briefly, but they could be a podcast in itself. But it's just to give people an idea of what you do. But for something that you think about, what is something that you do every day or close to every day that makes you feel like you've optimized the day?
Make my bed.
Oh, yeah.
So then, well, I'm lying there because I don't make my bed. My mom was always ask me, like, make sure when you wake up, you start with a prayer.
Yeah.
That has always been something that optimizes my day, regardless if I'm like lying in bed, if I'm not even sitting up, as long as I send that prayer through, that completes my day, because, as a believer, things always happen unexpectedly. You might walk out that door, you might not come back.
Yeah.
And so my mom was always said, look, as soon as you wake up, whatever time you wake up, if you're going to the bathroom, sit and have a prayer.
Yep.
And that will guide and protect you all throughout the day. That's one of the things that I would normally do when I wake up in the morning. But there's so many things that I actually do, but that is one of my priority that I do. Yeah, it sort of lifts me spiritually and mentally, because there's always challenges that we have to face when you go out into the world.
Absolutely,
especially. One of the hardest things to do is to deal with our people and looking after them at the same time and catering for their needs from the services that you provide, which are limited. And so what more can you do for them? What can you not do for them? So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's awesome because I always try to implement karakia during the day.
Yeah.
But for you, you know, when you are going through, so it sounds like you can just, as long as you're doing it, and
Yeah.
that's the first thing or close to the first thing that you do to start your day.
Yeah.
But are there, you know, main points that you try to, you know, cover when you go through, or do you have a list of things, or is it just how you're feeling in that moment?
Work-wise, there's always things that I need to achieve in the morning.
Yep.
Pretty much what I prioritize is what I need to get done first. It's not easy when you've got 2 jobs.
Yep.
I'm a disability services during the day, and I'm a farmer in the afternoon.
That's right. Yeah, man.
And so it's I'm used to the workload. I'm used to doing all this stuff that, you know, people ask me, how do you do it? Like, I don't know, I haven't studied yet, so they'll be on top of that. I haven't started studying, I haven't gone back to uni, so I might have to drop something.
Right.
But whatever investments that I do now is leaning towards what I want to become later, which is, you know, when I finish my studies, I want to become a doctor. You know, everything else is there when I'm done. But I've got at least, my mom always said that I'm very bad with, used to, when it comes to time management and planning things out. I think over the years I've just gone better. So, you know, something as simple as, you know, got to be prompt with when you're going for meetings and all that stuff.
Yep.
Those little things, eh?
Yep.
Yeah. Because mom would always say, you're not living in Fiji, you're living in a white man's world now, so you got to
right.
act and work accordingly, I guess. Yeah.
No, this has been awesome. Just all the different things that we've been able to bring in, and all the lessons. I think it's always beautiful hearing, you know, people who are very aware of the influences in their life, because you can see that, you know, it's in their character, but they are always the first to acknowledge who that came from and why you are the way that you are. And I think if you have that about you, you're going to be able to see the solutions quickly, because you'll know when you've moved away from your values, or when you've moved away from what makes you. So I've really appreciated this discussion. I'm really hoping we can get you in again, but until then, you know, I know you are a busy man, and we're just going to have to get things going. But for you, you know, front of mind, in terms of everything that we've discussed today, is there anything that you want to, you know, leave people with, or a piece of wisdom that you can have?
I've always had this saying by Helen Keller, because growing up I wasn't really the brightest student. I was a late bloomer.
Sure.
So I made a lot of mistakes all throughout the way. And so Helen Keller once said that making a mistake is just falling down. Failure is not getting up again.
Right.
And so sometimes, as hard as it may seem, you got to be comfortable with failure.
Yeah.
Because if you're not, you know, it's like, you know, if you're used to winning all the time, you're not used to losing all the time. And so you've got to understand and feel the same way with both weathers. We always say in my culture, or in Fiji, you've got to be all weather year round, so you can sort of weather the storm, if it's a good day, if it's a bad day. And so everything that I do, especially if I'm doing it for the first time that I've never done before, I expect to mess up.
Yeah.
And I felt comfortable with not succeeding the first time, because the next time around I'll be better at it.
Yeah.
And so whatever that you do out there, if it's not working out for you, maybe you can rethink and discuss a different way that you want to do it. Like you just got to be honest with yourself. If you can't do it, then it's better to try something else. But if you're pretty set on it, you know, go for it. You know, but you know, expect a lot of failures along the way. But also, a rocky road leads to a spectacular beach, kind of thing.
Oh man, that is a beautiful place to leave it. Thank you very much for your time today, man. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, brother.